Hello, my name is Kent Philpott. This is part 2 on a little 2-video program on Sarah Young and Jesus Calling. Oddly enough, I've kind of done this sort of thing for a long time. I kind of trace it to that I've been a long-time baseball coach and manager. I coach high school baseball right now. Starts next week, actually, conditioning, and I'm used to being second guessed and wondering why in the world I'm doing that, taking a lot of heat. It kind of goes with the job of managing, and probably altogether I've managed about 35 years of baseball teams of one sort of another. And I know I will take a little bit of heat on this, but I think that I'm willing to do it because I think it's an important issue. And this particular thing that is becoming extraordinarily popular, many people are entering into it, waiting on God to speak to them, visualizing various things that are associated with Christianity, and actually falling into anywhere from a light to a medium, sometimes a deep trance state. Now, that's a very dangerous thing because that's where the demonic lurks. And the deception is powerful. And once you experience it, you're really sold. Wow, what an incredible reality this is. And you think it's very spiritual. The most spiritual thing I've ever experienced has got to be from God. Well, not necessarily so. Now, I'm going to read an essay that I've written about this that I've been distributing. So here it is. I'm just going to read. Sarah Young practices listening prayer, in which she hears messages directly communicated from Jesus. It is a technique she describes in her best-selling book, Jesus Calling, which has sold over 9 million copies in 26 languages. This book is the 5th bestseller for the first half of 2013 for all books, not just Christian books. Through it all, the author maintains a low profile, partly due to physical disabilities, and thus she is relatively unknown. She has experienced chronic physical difficulties for many years and writes inspiringly of her loving connection with whom or what she thinks is Jesus. The messages comfort and encourage her. It all began with Sarah wondering if she could receive messages during times of prayer. She hoped God would talk to her personally, and it began to happen. And yes, she believes that Jesus is really and actually speaking with her. She prays, then listens, and he answers. This has been her experience for many years. And as she hears, she journals what she hears, and after a number of years, she published some of what she heard. Readers and prayer groups are encouraged and comforted by the messages, and as sales of her books demonstrate, she has a growing audience. Many thousands are now taking up the practice of listening prayer. The key question which must be asked is, who is speaking? Is it possible there is a clever demonic counterfeit here? Over the centuries, Christians have thought that God does speak to them. Richard Foster, who champions contemplative prayer or meditative prayer, defends Young's practices. He has modeled his own recommendations for deep meditation on contemplation on what Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, Ignatius Loyola, and many others practiced and experienced centuries ago. What Young does is the same as or quite similar to the exercises of these so-called Christian mystics. Sarah Young describes her own custom as meditating on Scripture and then waiting quietly to hear a reply from Jesus. When Jesus speaks, she writes down what she heard or was placed on her heart. The words or messages are not revelatory in the sense of prophecy or fortune-telling, she insists. The content of the messages are fairly ordinary and biblically based. The Bible plays a major role in Sarah's life, and she firmly believes it is the inspired revelation of God. However, and it is a huge however, she wanted more than what the Bible offers. She indeed got more and has come to rely on these communications, the encouraging directives from the Creator, she says. But there is a worrisome twist. When Young journals the words spoken by Jesus, They are written in the first person with Jesus as the person speaking. It is not Jesus said, rather it is focus on me. Since she purports to write down whatever Jesus says, readers of her book must conclude that her journal is as authoritative as the Bible, almost a fifth gospel. If this is not so, then Jesus Calling is a false writing, an imitation, albeit very clever, of a revelation from God. Young's error is therefore serious and similar to that of the Course in Miracles, supposedly communicated by Jesus to Helen Schucman in the 1970s. Schucman's Jesus dictated profoundly spiritual concepts to her, which she wrote down, and one of the most successful New Age cults was born. Schucman's Jesus bears little resemblance to the biblical Jesus, unlike Young's Jesus, but could this make the counterfeit even more difficult to detect? Young's book sales are phenomenal, and again I cannot help but be reminded of Helen Schucman and the Course in Miracles. As I study Jesus Calling, I do see a difference in the two books. Young's book is far more biblical Christian than Schucman's. The difference is clear, and I am tempted to embrace Young's claim to hear the voice of Jesus, but it will not work. There is neither biblical precedent nor warrant for quieting oneself, praying, and then listening for Jesus to speak. This is perhaps the most serious and dangerous counterfeit to be found in the broad spectrum that is charisma today. The Jesus supposedly speaking to Sarah Young is very affirming and encouraging, but little else. The messages lack the doctrinal content of the real Jesus found in Scripture. In fact, when one orders one of Sarah's books on Amazon.com, one sees that those who bought Sarah's book also like the books of Joyce Meyer and Joel Osteen, the purveyors of the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel. Sarah's Jesus is more like a warm, fuzzy teddy bear. Let me note that nowhere in Scripture does God promise to speak individually to believers or answer prayer by speaking directly to the one praying. This is the critical point. What I discovered in my decades of ministry is that if you want to hear things from God, you will, eventually. But the communication is not from God. However real and spiritual the communication might and will be. John 10:27 is quoted by proponents of Young's book as proof that Jesus speaks directly to his sheep. Quote, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." Unquote.